Commander Julian Mercer stood rigidly at attention as the massive ceremonial doors of the Zalari High Council chamber swung open. The air was thick with incense and tension. 3 years of brutal interstellar war had finally led to this moment. Peace seemed within grasp, if he could navigate the complex rituals of the honor-bound aliens that humanity had fought to a desperate stalemate. "Remember," whispered Ambassador Keller beside him, "accept whatever ceremonial gift they offer. Our analysts believe it will be symbolic. The treaty is too important." Julian nodded, his blue uniform contrasting sharply with the crimson and gold that dominated the alien architecture. The Zalari counselors, towering, elegant beings with iridescent scales and fierce eyes, watched his every move with calculating intensity. High Lord Va Sereth approached, his ceremonial armor catching the light from a dozen hovering orbs. His translator device hummed to life as he addressed the human delegation. "Commander Mercer of Earth," the device conveyed in a resonant tone, "your kind has fought with unexpected valor. Though smaller and younger than our empire, you have earned our respect through blood and courage." Julian bowed respectfully, careful to maintain eye contact as the briefing had instructed. Looking away would signal weakness to the predatory Zalari. "As our sacred traditions demand, we offer a gift to seal our covenant of peace," Va Sereth continued. He raised a clawed hand, and a side entrance opened. The woman who entered moved like flowing water. Her scales shimmered with subtle patterns that seemed to change with each graceful step. Unlike the warrior's functional attire, her ceremonial robes accentuated an athletic yet feminine form. Intricate metal adornments marked her high status, and her eyes, vertical pupils set in amber irises, held fierce intelligence. "The Lady Philovex of the royal bloodline," announced Va Sereth. "Master strategist, artist of the blade dance, scholar of 7 disciplines. She will be your peace wife, binding our peoples in the ancient way." A shocked murmur ran through the human delegation. Julian's expression froze while Ambassador Keller whispered urgently, "This is unexpected but not unprecedented. Historical records show similar practices." "She is our most prized treasure," Va Sereth continued, oblivious to the human's discomfort. "Trained since birth to represent our highest virtues. She will serve in your household, advise on Zalari matters, and bear successors if biology permits. No greater honor exists among our kind." Lady Philovex knelt before Julian with practiced grace, her head bowed in ceremonial submission. The room fell silent as every Zalari watched expectantly. Julian looked down at the kneeling woman, feeling a storm of emotions, diplomatic caution warring with his fundamental values. In her perfect posture, he detected something beneath the surface, not just duty, but resignation. A life spent fulfilling others' expectations. Ambassador Keller gripped his arm. "Commander, I strongly advise acceptance. Rejection would be catastrophic for the treaty." In that moment, Julian made his decision. He stepped forward and extended his hand to the kneeling woman. "Please stand, Lady Philovex," he said quietly. Confusion flickered across her features, but training prevailed as she took his hand and rose with fluid elegance. "High Lord Va Sereth," Julian addressed the Zalari leader, his voice clear and steady. "I deeply respect your traditions and am honored by your gesture, but I must decline this particular gift." The chamber erupted in hisses and growls as the translator struggled to keep up with the outraged Zalari responses. Va Sereth's scales darkened in what Julian recognized as a danger sign. "You are not a gift," Julian said directly to Philovex, whose eyes had widened in shock. "You're a person. You deserve a choice." For perhaps the first time in her life, Lady Philovex appeared genuinely surprised, her carefully composed facade cracking to reveal something no one, not even her own people, had seen before: uncertainty, and beneath it, a spark of something that looked remarkably like hope. The diplomatic quarters hummed with urgent communications as humans and Zalari attempted to salvage the peace process. 3 days had passed since Commander Julian Mercer's unprecedented refusal of Lady Philovex, and negotiations hung by a thread. Julian stood at the viewport, watching the alien capital's twin moons rise. The door chimed softly. "Enter," he called, expecting Ambassador Keller with more reproaches about his reckless idealism. Instead, Lady Philovex stepped into the room. She had exchanged her ceremonial robes for simpler attire, though the royal markings on her scales could not be disguised. "Commander Mercer," she said, her translator rendering her complex tonal language into crisp English. "I request a private audience." Julian gestured toward a seating area. "Please, make yourself comfortable." She moved with characteristic grace but remained standing. My people believe you insulted our highest traditions. They do not understand your refusal. And what do you believe? Julian asked quietly. Thilavex tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable amber eyes. I have spent 17 cycles studying human culture as part of my preparation. Your action was consistent with your species' peculiar ideals of individual autonomy. She paused. What I do not understand is why you would risk peace between our worlds for this concept. Because peace built on treating people as property isn't real peace, Julian replied. It's just another form of conquest. I was not to be your slave, she said sharply. I would have been honored as your consort, without being asked if that's what you wanted. Her scales rippled in what Julian had learned indicated complex emotion. Want? My training since birth has been for the greater honor of the Zalari. Personal desire is irrelevant. Julian shook his head. Where I come from, it's everything. Silence stretched between them, heavy with cultural chasms wider than the space their species had fought across. Finally, Thilavex spoke. I have made a decision. I will join your delegation, not as a gift, but as an advisor on Zalari affairs. This may help salvage the treaty. That's your choice to make, Julian said, relief evident in his voice. But won't this cause problems with your people? It already has, she replied, her posture stiffening. I have been disinherited from the royal bloodline. But there are progressive factions who support my decision. Julian's expression softened. I'm sorry. I never intended. Do not apologize for treating me as an equal, she interrupted. It is refreshing. The following weeks proved challenging as they worked together. Julian found in Thilavex a brilliant mind unconstrained by diplomatic niceties. She found in him an honorable warrior who fought with words as effectively as weapons. During one late night of negotiations, she confided, we received intelligence about your ethics before the war. Our analysts believed humans would be easily conquered because you restrain yourselves in battle. Julian smiled wryly. How did that assessment work out? Poorly, she admitted, the subtle chromatophores in her scales shifting in what he'd learned was amusement. We underestimated how fiercely you fight when defending your principles. Their growing rapport didn't go unnoticed. Ambassador Keller pulled Julian aside after a particularly productive session. Whatever you're doing with Lady Thilavex, keep it up, Keller said. But be careful. There are factions on both sides unhappy with this peace. Julian nodded, unaware that across the city, Thilavex faced much harsher criticism. You dishonor generations of tradition, Elder Sarax hissed, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the council chamber. Fraternizing with the human instead of fulfilling your purpose. Thilavex met his gaze steadily. Perhaps our traditions need re-examination if they cannot withstand new ideas. Dangerous talk, another elder warned. Some might question where your loyalties truly lie. As she left the chamber, a younger counselor fell into step beside her. Be vigilant, Lady Thilavex, he whispered. There are rumors of sabotage planned against the treaty. Not everyone wants this peace. That night, as the capital's bioluminescent gardens pulsed with gentle light, Thilavex found herself contemplating choices she'd never imagined having and dangers that threatened everything both worlds had fought for. The encrypted data crystal gleamed in Julian's palm as Thilavex's voice filled his private quarters. These troop movements don't match the official records, she said, pointing to discrepancies in the holographic projection. These battalions should be demobilizing according to the treaty preparations. Julian frowned. Similar inconsistencies are appearing in human forces near the Cygnus border. He looked up at her. Someone's positioning for a renewal of hostilities. 3 months into their cooperation, they had developed an efficient rhythm. Where Julian saw patterns in behavior, Thilavex perceived cultural subtexts. Where she understood Zalari power structures, he recognized military strategies. The treaty signing is in 2 weeks, Julian said, rubbing his tired eyes. Not much time to identify who's behind this. We should investigate Commander Raxil, Thilavex suggested. His faction opposed peace from the beginning. Julian nodded. And Admiral Chan on our side. The timing of her fleet movements seems convenient. Their investigation took them through shadowy diplomatic channels and secured military communications. Each discovery brought them physically closer, shoulders touching as they examined evidence, hands brushing as they exchanged data crystals. One evening, as they worked in Julian's quarters, Thilavex asked, "Does it disturb you?" "My appearance." Julian looked up, surprised. "Why would it?" "I'm not human," she stated simply. "My culture values beauty differently than yours." Julian considered her, the iridescent scales that caught light like opals, the fierce intelligence in her amber eyes, the graceful strength in her movements. I find beauty in many forms, he said carefully, including yours. Her chromatophores flickered rapidly, a reaction she couldn't control. That is, unexpected. Before Julian could respond, his communication terminal chimed urgently. Security breach in Sector 7, reported a harried officer. Unauthorized access to the treaty documents. They rushed to the diplomatic archives, finding signs of forced entry and disabled security systems. Professional job, Julian muttered, examining the melted access panel. Filovex knelt, touching residue on the floor. Corrosive compound unique to Zolari military operations. Your people. Or someone wanting us to think so. As they exited the archives, a shadow moved at the corridor's end. Filovex reacted instantly, shoving Julian aside as energy fire scorched the wall where he'd been standing. Julian rolled and drew his sidearm in one fluid motion, returning fire as Filovex advanced with startling speed toward their attacker. The assassin, a figure in nondescript armor, retreated around a corner. Are you injured? Filovex demanded, returning to Julian's side. I'm fine. Thanks to you. Their eyes met, adrenaline heightening the moment between them. Security forces arrived minutes later, but the attacker had vanished. In Julian's quarters, reviewing surveillance footage, they made a disturbing discovery. That's not standard Zolari tactics, Filovex said, watching the attacker's movements. They're using human military formations with Zolari technology. Julian's expression darkened. We're looking at a coordinated effort from both sides. Later that night, as they prepared to part, Filovex hesitated at his door. My people have a saying, truth emerges in battle. I have seen your truth, Julian Mercer. And what is it? He asked softly. You live your principles, she said. Few warriors of any species can claim as much. Her hand rose, hesitantly touching his face, a gesture forbidden between their kinds until now. The contact sent warmth spreading through him as her scale shifted to a deep violet hue. What does that color mean? Julian asked, his voice low. Perhaps one day I will tell you, she replied, withdrawing her hand and departing swiftly, leaving Julian with questions that had nothing to do with conspiracies or treaties. This can't be right, Julian muttered, reviewing the evidence for the 5th time. The secure conference room felt suffocating as implications sank in. Filovex watched him from across the table, her posture unnaturally rigid even by Zolari standards. The communications trace is clear, Julian. Someone in your inner circle is communicating with the conspirators. The damning evidence pointed directly to Ambassador Keller, Julian's mentor and friend for over a decade. There must be another explanation, Julian insisted. Keller's dedicated his life to peace. Perhaps that dedication was a facade, Filovex suggested, her tone gentler than her words. Julian pushed away from the table, pacing. I've known that man for 12 years. He pulled me out of a war zone on Proxima B. He wouldn't betray everything we've worked for. Loyalty is admirable, Filovex said carefully, but evidence cannot be ignored because it's painful. Their eyes met across the room, his filled with hurt, hers with something complex that her translator couldn't convey. My people believe absolute trust is foolish, she continued. Yet you trusted me when all your advisors cautioned against it. Julian stopped pacing. That was different. Was it? Filovex approached him slowly. You saw something in me worth trusting against all logic and precedent. Perhaps someone saw something in Keller worth corrupting. The treaty signing was just days away. With both delegations arriving, security had tightened throughout the capital. Yet tensions increased with each passing hour. That evening, as Julian returned to his quarters, he found a message waiting coordinates and a time, signed with Keller's personal code. No explanation. It could be a trap, Filovex argued when he showed her. Or a chance to understand what's happening, Julian countered. Then I'm coming with you. Julian shook his head. Too risky. If anything happens to you. My choice, she interrupted, using his own philosophy against him. Her scales rippled with determination. Remember? The meeting point was an abandoned communications hub in the city's industrial sector. They arrived separately, Julian first, then Filovex taking position as backup. Ambassador Keller emerged from the shadows, looking haggard. You weren't supposed to bring her, he said, eyeing Filovex warily. She brought herself, Julian replied. Explain the communications, David. I was approached 6 months ago by extremists, Keller admitted. They threatened my family on Earth unless I provided information. I've been feeding them misinformation, trying to identify the leadership. A dangerous game, Thielevex commented, keeping her distance. Did you stage the archive break-in? Julian demanded. No, Keller looked genuinely shocked. That was real. Julian, they're planning something at the signing ceremony. Something catastrophic. Before Julian could respond, weapons fire erupted around them. 3 attackers in mixed human Zalari tactical gear descended from overhead positions. Julian dove for cover, drawing his sidearm as Thielevex moved with preternatural speed, engaging the nearest attacker. Keller took a hit to the shoulder, crying out as he fell. The firefight was brutal and short. When it ended, 2 attackers lay dead, the 3rd unconscious, and Keller was bleeding heavily despite Thielevex's emergency field dressing. Get into medical, she urged Julian. I'll secure the prisoner. Hours later, with Keller stabilized and the captured conspirator in custody, Julian found Thielevex in his quarters, tending to a wound on her arm. You should have that treated properly, he said, closing the door behind him. It's superficial, she replied, but allowed him to examine it. As he carefully cleaned the injury, Julian said quietly, You saved Keller's life. Why? Because you value him, she answered simply. And I value you. The admission hung between them, fragile and momentous. Julian's hands stilled on her arm. Thielevex. Among my people, actions speak louder than words, she said, her scale shifting to that same deep violet. But humans seem to need both. She leaned forward, her face inches from his. This is my choice, Julian Mercer. Their first kiss was a discovery, different textures, temperatures, anatomies finding unexpected harmony. Her scales were smoother than he'd imagined, warming beneath his touch as his hands traced the contours of her back. That color, Julian whispered against her neck. Will you tell me now what it means? Her laugh was melodic, a sound few humans had ever heard from a Zalari. It means desire, Julian. Surely you've guessed that much. Their bodies found their way to understanding, bridging differences with instinct and care, creating something neither of their worlds had witnessed before, intimacy born of respect rather than obligation. Later, as Julian drifted towards sleep with Thielevex curled against him, he murmured, Tomorrow we save the peace. Her hand tightened on his. Together. The grand concourse of unity gleamed under the planet's 3 suns, its architecture a deliberate blend of human and Zalari design elements. Thousands gathered for the historic treaty signing, dignitaries from both species, military leaders who had once targeted each other across battlefields, media broadcasting to billions across 2 civilizations. Behind the ceremonial grandeur, Julian and Thielevex moved with precise coordination. Intelligence extracted from the captured conspirator had confirmed their worst fears, a synchronized attack plan during the ceremony, designed to kill leadership from both sides and reignite the war. Security teams are in position, Julian confirmed through his comms. How's the Zalari side? Elder Veritha's loyalists have contained the military conspirators, Thielevex replied, scanning the crowd from her elevated position. But we haven't located all the human infiltrators. The ceremony began with traditional fanfare. High Lord Va Sereth and the human president took center stage, prepared to sign the document that would end 3 years of devastating conflict. Julian spotted the anomaly first, a service worker moving against the crowd flow, hand reaching inside their uniform. Section 3, moving toward the stage, he transmitted, already in motion. Across the concourse, Thielevex identified another, a disguised human with a telltale military posture. Human operative by the Eastern Entrance, she relayed, intercepting with remarkable speed. What followed was chaos, but controlled chaos. As conspirators realized their plot was exposed, they abandoned subtlety for direct action. Weapons appeared, but security forces were ready, neutralizing threats with minimal civilian casualties. Julian tackled the first assassin mere meters from the president, while Thielevex disarmed her target with a move that left onlookers gasping. Throughout the concourse, the carefully positioned security teams they had orchestrated acted with surgical precision. When it ended, the treaty remained unsigned but intact. 12 conspirators were in custody, their plot exposed to both worlds. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the injured and security processed prisoners, Julian found Thielevex outside the emergency command center. Hell of a diplomatic incident, he said, sporting a bandage across his forehead. Her scales shimmered with exhaustion, but her eyes remained bright. An interesting first date by human standards, I imagine. Julian laughed despite everything. Not quite what I had planned for us. The doors opened behind them as High Lord Va Sereth emerged with the president and their respective delegations. Commander Mercer, Lady Thelevex, the High Lord addressed them formally. Both our worlds owe you a debt. The treaty will be signed tomorrow with additional security measures. The President nodded agreement. We've discussed creating a joint security force to prevent future extremist collaborations. We'd like you both to head it. Julian and Thelevex exchanged surprised glances. There is another matter, V.A. Sereth continued, his normally commanding tone hesitant. Your relationship has become known to both our peoples. Julian stiffened, preparing for disapproval, but the High Lord continued. While unprecedented, it has proven remarkably effective. The Council has revoked Lady Thelevex's disinheritance and recognizes her status under a new designation. New designation? Thelevex questioned. Ambassador by choice, V.A. Sereth explained. A position created for those who forge their own diplomatic paths rather than following traditional assignments. 3 days later, as celebrations continued across both worlds, Julian and Thelevex stood on a balcony overlooking the capital's central plaza, where humans and Zalari mingled with cautious curiosity. Your refusal caused quite the diplomatic incident, Thelevex mused, her hand entwined with his. Worth it, Julian replied simply. My people are already debating reforms to our gift traditions, she said, and yours are reconsidering assumptions about Zalari culture. Julian turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I've been thinking about traditions myself, actually. Oh, Earth has an old custom for when two people decide they want to build a future together, he began, suddenly nervous. It typically involves a ring, but I thought this might be more appropriate. He produced a small box containing an intricate metal emblem, a hybrid of Zalari royal insignia and human military honors. This is a choice I'm offering, not a command or expectation, Julian said carefully. Would you consider building something new with me? Something neither of our worlds has seen before. Thelevex's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors before settling on the deepest violet he'd ever seen. I believe, she said, her voice rich with emotion that needed no translator, that I made my choice the moment you gave me one. As they sealed their promise in both human and Zalari fashion, below them in the plaza, two civilizations began their own careful dance of discovery, learning that peace built on respect and choice was stronger than any forged through tradition alone.